Meeting to order. Today is December 3rd, 2024. It is 5:06 p.m. Next, we will move to the minutes for approval for October 1st, 2024. Have we had time to review the meeting minutes? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any comments on the minutes? None?
None.
Any public comment? I don't see any public in the audience, so we will move on. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes carry. All right, we will move on to number 3A, Chapter 14, Nuisances, Hazards, and Insanitary Conditions. So I know this has been presented yet. Thank you, Mr. Chris, if you want to come on up. I know this has been presented a couple of times. Some changes were made. I see that the highlighted stuff about green roof. I know we've kind of discussed and debated this a little bit. What's the wishes of the committee? Do we want to discuss this any further? Do we want to refer this up to the council? What's the thoughts?
Now, Chris, was there anything new? I mean, the highlighted ones are actually from a previous version.
Nothing's, I made the final changes that you requested. So nothing has been changed since then. So I figured this was going to be the final draft, and with y'all's blessing, we'll take it to the council.
Did you have in this list, did you have the changes from the last meeting in a different color, or are they just mixed in?
Everything that's in yellow is basically has been added, which is new for the whole chapter.
Right.
Okay. It's cumulative. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So last time we talked about the frontages.
Mm-hmm.
I think was the last conversation we had. What else did we have?
Yeah, you had me refer to chapter 22, section 22-3.
Oh, yeah. We were, instead of restating something that could change somewhere else, we were just trying to reference other chapters. Yes, that's right.
Was the last time when we discussed all of the tree-related entries, like 14-11, removal of trees, imminent danger of falling? I know that was kind of a recent.
That should be, as was scratched, that whole section was removed. Yeah.
14-11, because I still see it here.
On mine, it was completely removed.
Okay.
So
Yeah, because
I
in the attachment, it's still there.
yeah, that's the one. That's the.
Does that match?
No, that doesn't.
No,
Because see, that's still got it.
Previous version.
So the new version, 14-11, has been stricken from the section completely.
Okay, so it stops at 10,
Yes,
where
sir.
it stops. So 11.
So we really need to get a copy of that.
Raphael, do you mind making a copy of that real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see.
And then I guess make 4 copies. That way he can have one as well.
Right.
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Thank you. So we removed all the stuff related to trees, and then before I handed it to Raphael, it looked like there was everything else above was the same.
Yes, sir. Except for that one section I asked for Councilman Valley, basically referring it to a previous chapter or another chapter. So there was basically we would know to reference another section if we needed to.
I was just scanning back through real quick. So where do we? Okay, parking lot maintenance. That was one of the ones I wanted to. So where do we land on this? It says owner of the property used for parking shall maintain good working conditions. Do you have a comment on that?
This one still has did it change on the current parking lot
No,
guidelines?
because I
It
thought, last time we talked, we said
Yeah.
we're going to clean it up when we hit chapter 18.
Okay. So that one is just referring back to chapter 18.
Right. Chapter 18, we'll clear that up when we actually get to that section.
But you've got that in your,
No, but I can add that. That'll be an easy thing. I'll reference chapter 18. Problem is that I wouldn't have a subsection to add to it at this point in time.
I think referencing the overall chapter.
Okay.
Parking guidelines shall be per chapter 18. Parking guidelines, that should cover it. And so I guess the final discussion on that was we will reference back to that. The current parking lot guidelines will then, in chapter 18, identify what upgrades would be required. So really, I mean, it's kind of If it's a chicken and an egg or a catch-22.
Mhm.
Because
Well,
really all we do is follow DOT guidelines for parking space or Florida state statute for parking spaces guidelines.
Well, yeah, there's,
I mean, as in the
To an
spacing, the
extent.
width and
Yeah.
And length,
ADT.
yeah, but in terms of, any kind of landscape requirements are purely city landscape requirements adjacent to parking or hiding parking. We'll have, I mean, we don't set the standard for striping. We don't set a standard for
Right.
parking space size necessarily, although we can.
So do we really need 14-6 in here, or
Well, that
do
was
we
part
just
of the-
need to?
That was part of the thing, is like, we need something to say that parking lots are subject to the, oversight of,
But why can't we do that in 18? Why does it have to be here? If we're going to define it in 18,
I mean, this mostly was for like if you had your potholes and whatnot. 18 to me is going to be your true guidelines.
right,
This was for
maintenance.
such 20th Street and Highway 90, where they
Mhm,
basically
mhm,
you would knock your vehicle out of alignment
mhm.
driving through the parking lot.
Right, right.
So this was basically going to be under chapter 14 for nuisances where it's like that, but the actual guidelines of what you, when you did your construction, would still fall under chapter 18.
Okay.
And we've got, there's one parking lot that the back half of the parking lot's collapsed into a drainage ditch that's eroding underneath it.
Where's that?
Right, not say.
Huh?
I'd rather not say.
Okay. All right.
Alright.
Hang on one second. Yes, sir. Hey. While we're
Oh.
having the code review and land use committee meeting, are you gonna make it? No, it's not canceled. Huh. Yeah, I see it.
I don't know why his would do that.
Yeah, I mean, Raphael's making copies right now, so we did properly notice this, didn't we? Kobe?
I'll
Hang on, let me check.
Mine's still where it was.
Yeah, because it's showing correct on mine. No, you haven't been fired. Okay, thanks. All right, bye. Yeah, for some reason it got canceled on his calendar.
That's so weird. Yeah, it's still on mine.
I still have it. But it straight up shows canceled on his.
That's
Yes, we noticed it.
Okay.
How does it?
All right.
It's a Google one, right? They don't, well,
Well, apparently that was an invite sent directly to him. I don't know. All right, he'll be here in 10, so we can kind of just continue the discussion until then.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we are just going to kind of leave this here, but we are going to reference 18.
I can add
That
that.
sound good?
That's an easy fix.
That's great.
That's big fan. Yes, that sounds
Okay.
good. We'll move it to that. We'll
Okay.
go with-
and I think what we, again, and what we discussed on that one, I thought was, current parking guidelines is where it would reference back to 18. So if no site plan was approved, it shall conform to chapter 18,
Okay.
wouldn't it?
Yes, sir.
And we cleaned up all the violations enumerated. All right, so kind of given all this, do we want to have this thing come back one more time to us, or do we want to have him make those changes and send it up to the city council for consideration?
I think he's got them
I think you,
on this one he's about to hand us, right?
yeah.
Do it, sir?
You've got those changes on
Well-
this one you're about to hand us?
Minus the reference to 18.
Which is
18
just,
in
No.
which would just be 3 or 4 words, yeah.
I'm okay with that one. That one's small enough. Now, what has to happen is when we review chapter 18, we have to make sure that we include the standard for
Yes.
if no previous site plan was approved, parking lot shall provide
Mhm.
X. And it'll just be a stripped down or a more basic version. That would not be placing a heavy burden on individuals unless they're going and making significant changes to their property that would require a redo of the parking lot.
Right.
Okay.
But that's where we have to be cautious is on the follow-up in chapter 18 and make sure we include it.
Kind of like when McDonald's removed the playground and
Yes.
did all that,
Yes. Now,
which was years ago.
yeah, because it was unfortunate because instead of adding landscaping, they deleted landscaping.
So are we good with kind of moving it forward, or do we want to have it come back one more time?
No. Move it forward. I must just move forward, just make those adjustment changes that you got and go with it.
Are you comfortable with that? Do you-
Yes, sir. I can add those 3 words to it as we
Okay.
did the other one. And would you like it just emailed to you individually so you can do one final check and
Sure, that'd be
you
great.
can email back to,
We can
This is
coordinate
city
with the
manager? if you had anything else you want to change, then
Because this is one of our main, this is our main one when it comes to code violations. So
yes, this is
We'll update it.
chapter 14 is what I
We'll
use
send
almost
it
for every
out and then
violation.
we'll plan on having it the first meeting in January. So that'll give every council member plenty of time to review it and.
But we'll send it out this month. to all the
Correct.
council
Yeah.
members.
Once Chris makes the changes, we'll go ahead and send it out and that'll give everybody a month to review it prior to the council meeting.
Fantastic. Okay. Yes, sir.
So the international standard that you're referencing at the beginning,
Yes, sir.
do you have a copy of that we can review?
Yes, sir.
I know it's-
I can print off the book for you and let you know.
Well, I mean, isn't that like a 300-page manual? How
I
big is
want to say
that?
it's more like 150.
That's one
Do
night.
you have a
read.
PDF?
Actually, I do have on PDF.
That's what I was going to suggest is we may want to review that as a PDF. It's
That'd be an exhilarating read.
it's worse than you think.
It is.
Well,
The only concern I have about that is that it's such a exhaustive standard that it leaves me with pause in terms of. Thank you. Yes, sir. Here you go.
But it's a standard that has been proven. And right now I do not have a standard.
Yes, sir, absolutely. Now, the big part you're
That's
using in
under
that is
14.2, right? No, we're talking about the IPMC.
Yes, sir. The International Code Council, Property Maintenance Code.
yeah. So that's like saying a Florida building code, basically.
Mhm.
Kind of, yes.
It's like a chapter.
And in the most of the sections I use for, unless they invite me into a residence is the ones that I've mostly, are the outside. And it's guidelines such as, chipping, peeling paint, gaps in the windows, broken windows.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a whole section for exterior that I can look at and go by. But, also that's things that I have to be able to see from the roadway. So I'm not like taking binoculars and looking for the fine details. It's something that's going to be obvious that we can fix and whatnot. Now, I do like the guidelines just because I had a complaint there at the, one of the motels where the fire chief and I went there and they have numerous violations. And, luckily, I have something to go by for the inside. They had open electrical boxes, which is by fire code. You can't have that either. So, it gives me something that I actually have teeth to say, it's not Chris's opinion. It's a standard that has been used and upheld by other magistrates.
Mhm. So what is your concern?
It's a 200-page document put together by the Code Council, which is the same organization that does the building code. So it is going to provide the definitions and clarity on that, but it's going to be an exhaustive document. It's not as narrow as the things that we've looked at. It goes well beyond the basic scope of what we've outlined here and goes into, like he was mentioning, issues that he may run into with the evaluation of a structure that he can walk the interior of. So I just want everyone to feel comfortable with that because it goes beyond. If someone reads our code and they just look at this and they gloss over that part, they're missing a substantial.
So Clay, does that track that if we adopt that per 14-2, that it kind of broadens the scope of this way out to it basically encompass any topic that's in the 2021 edition of the International Property Maintenance Code?
That's effectively what it does. Yeah. That's exactly what it's going to do. The question becomes, and this will be something Chris has to deal with regarding to what you'll be able to prove at the magistrate is there sufficient notice? You're telling them it's a manual, but you're referring to a manual. We probably will need a link to that somewhere on our city website. And we would need to make it available for someone. Typically what I've seen, Mr. Strong, with magistrate hearings, when we reference it, we've seen this where people actually get into under parking enforcement, where you don't have enough parking spaces. They make a change to a parking lot. They take up something for an addition, things like that. In those scenarios, and they reference the IT manual typically is how it works in that world, that there is a notice given for the deficiency with additional period of time to correct or remedy, and then see how they respond to it.
So is there a way, and I'm sorry, you may have just said this and I just didn't register. Is there a way to utilize and recognize that we're going to utilize that without necessarily adopting it and basically bringing it all into scope?
I mean, I think you're either going to bring it all into scope or not. I think it's just one of those that we're going to need to be tactful in how we implement something of that magnitude. Because I feel confident that aside from perhaps Mr. Valley, and if you have, bravo, Mr. Strong, I don't know if anybody else in this room has read that manual in any real detail. I mean, I can tell you I've looked up provisions of it, but I've never read it cover to cover. And so, I mean, that's going to be the first step. And here's going to be the other problem is the first time somebody says, well, did you know this? You may well find five or six contractors that don't have a clue about it.
Now, also, I mean, they don't get one letter and then they go in front of the magistrate. This is usually a 3 to a 5 month process before they go to the magistrate once they receive the first warning notice. Because they usually receive a warning notice and then they get a letter of violation. And then if I haven't heard from them, then they get a certified letter of violation. So that's 3 months right there. So 90 days. But then if I hear from you and we discuss what's happening and you say like, well, okay, part of it is the roof is collapsing. All right. And I'm working with the CRA too, or I'm trying to raise $10,000. I understand money's a growing tree. So I may give you 3 more months of extensions while you're raising the money, as long as you keep me informed of what's happening. So, I mean, a lot of this comes down to communication and what you're willing to do.
Yes, sir.
So I guess the easy way to say this is if we don't adopt a standard, we have to create a full standard. What that means is he has to identify, or we have to identify every single thing that could be a violation, define when it becomes a violation, and then you still have to have a standard to base that on.
Okay, so your argument though was to be
But
careful about adopting this, but then
it's because it's broad. And I think people are going to be surprised how much it's in there. And I think like one concern that I would have is that I think we need to talk about this. It's like there's going to be things in there that we're not going to be enforcing. And we might get called out on, well, why aren't you enforcing this provision?
Well, it's what I can see from the right of way, unless, you invite me into your house.
And that's some portion of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I think there's a secondary aspect of it is in terms of providing training to you and others that will be interpreting the code.
Well, I'm actually in the process of trying to there's a test to get certified on this. So that actually I'm basically a certified inspector.
Okay.
So I'm actually in the process of studying the manual completely so I can take a test.
So given that, and you spent time with the manual at this point because you're doing that. Have you seen anything in there that would give you concern or pause about either trying to limit its scope or just in general give you concern or pause?
No, not really. I mean, there's sections in there I know that I won't be truly enforcing. And that would fall under, it talks about the ventilation. I mean, I'm not going in looking at that stuff. How far the plugs are supposed to be up, that's going to fall under, the county when they do their inspections of the houses. That's not going to be my concerns. Now, if I go in and see all the outlets open, yeah, look, you need to go put your covers on your outlets. It's a safety hazard. If you have, especially if you have children there, stick your fingers around the edges, get zapped.
So an outside, so you're not an electrician, but if you see an electrical panel on the exterior of a house that's missing the cover,
Exactly.
You
I
can-
can
you
say
feel
something, that's a
comfortable-
safety standard. You need to do something about it.
but without this standard to reference, he's not an electrician outside of that code and that certification. He's not qualified to comment on that.
Yeah.
But with the code there, since it says it's a safety standard, I can actually say per our manual or per the book, it's a violation. You need to cover up, you need to fix it, you need to do whatever you need to do to make it safe.
By the same token, what I want to point out, and the reason I had my pause isn't about not loving it, it's about this. We've never gone around telling people, hey, you guys don't have a cover on your panel. The city hasn't done that.
Right.
So again, we're going to be introducing a conversation that hasn't been happening before.
I don't think is it our desire to have code enforcement run around and look at people's panels to whether they're covered and comply?
That's ultimately the decision of what we're talking about here in terms of this hazard, because that is creating a true hazard. At that point, you can actually start a fire without a human being becoming involved. The squirrel now has full access. They actually go on there. They ground out. They start fire right there at the panel, and on a pine old house, that's going to spread everywhere. So it's an obvious hazard. Enough rain hits it, you'll short out the panel and it'll blow. It may or may not catch on fire, but it will blow.
The only thing I really would like from y'all, from the council, is right now, if you read A, all it says is all buildings and structures will be maintained in a safe and sanitary condition. I just need something to give me a definition, what is safe and sanitary, so that I can, when I take it from the magistrate, I have something to back up. So if all of us went to looked at a house, we were all on the same page saying, yes, these are all the violations that need to be fixed. Not I only see one, but Councilman Beerbaume sees four.
Yeah.
It gives me something black and white. It's not my opinion of what needs to be done.
Yeah, I guess I'm hearing both is the problem. I hear the concern that we're going to make this overly broad, and then that can lead to, just like, I think we have to consider both sides of this, right? Just
we
like
do.
when we were developing the charter, right? We had to kind of think of all the possible scenarios, the good and the bad.
No,
And not that you're gonna do the bad, right? That's not what I'm saying. But I think if you're not here and someone else is here, and maybe they're a little more legalistic, and they literally start toting that IPMC manual around with them and looking for violations, I don't think that's the desire of the council.
no, and I agree with that. Like right now, if I go to a house, for me to actually write up a structure, it has to be more than just one violation. It has to be an accumulation of 3 or 4 violations on the property before I just write the house. You're going to have chipping, peeling paint, wood rot. It's going to be obvious violations from the roadway.
But this doesn't say that. That's the problem.
And ultimately, that's why I'm bringing this up. It's not to make it complicated. I just want everyone to understand. It's like if you get a group and it starts transitioning into a punitive thing, you can have someone that does start to do that based on this. How does the council feel about that? How does this committee feel about that? How do we manage that? And Clay, it's as much a question for you as it is, a question for Chris. It's like, again, having continuity and more than one person is doing this and making sure it doesn't get out of whack is how we maintain that. Just, we've all had that conversation with each other at some point. It's like, well, just don't be an idiot, be sensible about what we're doing, be reasonable about what we're expecting of individuals, understand, and everyone have an understanding of what's expected so that we don't get into a point where it is completely out of whack with what the expectations of us and the community are. But is there a way to, again, this is a guardrail. How do we keep it from getting completely out of control without going to someone and punishing someone for doing their job a little over enthusiastically, let's say? And I just don't know.
I would say almost when I was in law enforcement, it comes down to officer discretion. I mean, you have the officers that are absolute law, but they usually don't last very long in law enforcement. So it comes down to, one, I follow underneath Mr. Wallace, the planning director, and he does oversee. So eventually, let's say in 6 years, I retire. Well, the planning director should help oversee, but hopefully I'll be training someone to take my section. And I'm going to help train that, look, you don't just go after one violation that's just because they have just a little section of peeling and chipping paint. You look at the totality of everything that's happening, you do what's best for the city.
Can we?
Yeah, it's a little bit like traffic enforcement when you get down to that. The speed limit's the speed limit, and the state trooper can pull everybody on I-10 that's going 71 miles an hour over all they want. They don't have to blink. But does that mean they should be doing it?
Is there a possibility of putting some sort of preamble, kind of like what we did a little bit in the charter, where we kind of explain this is the wish and the position of the council, on certain topics? Could we incorporate something like that here, or would that just end up being words that don't mean anything and not really enforceable?
So you are probably right in your statement. That's not what I worry about. While you're probably right, they're just words, or it's a preamble, it's an intent statement that doesn't mean anything. I worry about the opposite. If I'm representing somebody on a code violation, I'm going to come forward and say, here's the intent of the council. It is in the preamble. The council made it very clear that it shouldn't be overly punitive. It should be this. Why is my client being targeted for this? And behind the scenes, we have all had a conversation where somebody's come into the Funiac and they've bought up 14 houses in the historic district. And they started working on them. Everything is wonderful. And next thing you know, all 14 of them are in various states of disrepair. They have to crack the whip on them for 3 years to get them finished up, and they finish it up, but they're slapping paint on that's peeling off the first time you get a rainstorm that has any kind of sideways rain blowing in, because they did it as bad as they could just to get out from under it. And the answer is crack the whip on this guy every time you get it. But his attorney's sitting there saying, your preamble says don't. And so what I would say in that sense is it's going to be a defensive mechanism. And it's going to depend on how big your fine is and your penalty before somebody hires an attorney to do it, but it could be that. The other thing that worries me that I will say, I guess, is really kind of a question for the two elected officials up here. Greg, you serve with them as an appointee, but I would be cautious putting statements of intent into this type of document, because it's a statement of intent that embodies the council's feeling at the time it's passed. It will never and can never actually reflect the intent of the planning director and the code officer hearing the case at the time, or of a future council in that enforcement. So to the extent you get credit for it now from the public who says they appreciate hearing that, it is only going to reflect the council's intent and not the practical application. So from a political consequence standpoint, there's a benefit to telling the public what we're doing and to send that message to everybody. This is how we want to govern our city. But it is also a consequence that what they do in the field is not gonna be governed by that preamble, it's gonna be governed by that manual. And there's got always be a disconnect. And somebody one day is gonna ask, well, why aren't we following our intent? And we heard this with the charter, and I think the reason we did the charter preamble had a lot more to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you misremember this, was, and because I remember Dr. McKnight kind of pushing back on the preamble, if I'm not mistaken, for a lot of the reasons we're talking about here. But the difference was we felt there's a benefit to conveying the preamble that tracked very closely to what Mr. Owen's committee did prior to that revised committee. And it was meant to be, I won't say an olive branch because there wasn't animosity, but a call back to what the first committee had done just to get us a document that was a single charter and you didn't have to review through 190 plus pages of laws of Florida in the Division of Library and Management Services in Tallahassee, like I had to get you that. There was a real benefit to including that language that even he ultimately conceded. But when we interpret the charter, we don't ever go to that preamble for any clause below it.
True, true.
So just broad thoughts and considerations, but things to reference.
At the end of the day, it's going to be the friction of the community and the council back on staff and how they interpret and how they're applying the rules that will guide it. That is subject to the temperature of the time and the temperament of the time. So, I mean, there is a natural way to do it, but it can be unpleasant to get there and to start calling it out. I just wanted us to have that conversation so that we're prepared for that conversation in the future when we go to the council in general and when we're addressing the public for them to understand that. At the end of the day, yes, he can interpret all this. That's not the temperature or the will at this time. Could it be at some point in the future? Yes. We don't know what any other board's going to do.
And I'm hoping when we get to chapter 11, there's a section that will help people understand that we're not here trying to punish anyone, really. There's a possible lien reduction that is being presented in chapter 11 for y'all to help remediate some of the problems you think that may be coming up.
And I think it's similar to a lot of the stuff we do. It's this is going to give Chris something to go off of, but in the day, I'm always a liaison to the council. So as the council's, as you said, temperatures change, it's going to be, y'all want the city cleaned up at this type of level or this type of level. And then I work with Chris and we enforce it to that extent. And then I'm the check and balance on Chris and you're the check and balance on us because, hey, Kobe, I've got 3 phone calls. You just did these things. That's a little too much. We're bringing stuff council maintenance is a little too much. We need to scale it back some. So Chris and I would work on that to the planning director.
Okay.
So to me, at the end of the day, it comes back. It's always going to fall back on me in the interpretation of what the council wants to see done.
So, Clay, we discussed basically moving this forward. There was going to be one minor change that Chris is going to make.
Which would be
to
under
reference-
4.6. Chapter 18.
Yeah, to reference chapter 18.
Okay.
So is
So
there,
basically cross-reference, okay.
yeah, is there, do we need a motion to basically move this forward with
Let's
that
do that.
correction?
Let's take it as a motion of the committee.
Okay. Do you-
I'll make a motion to move forward.
All right, have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, have a second. I don't see anybody in the audience for public comment, so we'll move on from public comment. Any final comments before we vote?
We said Chris make the change. We'll get it out to all the council members a month in advance, let y'all review it, and then we'll have it on the first meeting in January.
And then I guess we'll provide this as well as a link to the IPMC manual as
I
well.
will actually attach the PDF to the email to you so you can do a quick look over. That's what you're doing.
I feel like we can also, if approved, we should be able to link it within the code since it's all.
I believe you'd be able to.
We can figure out a way, but yeah.
Okay.
I know this because I don't have to spend as much money as I used to on code books. They did recognize that if you're going to have a code, it has to be accessible to the public. And so they release these from, the requirement of having to purchase them. But I don't know how the link sharing works.
Okay.
But it has to be made available, even ASTM, all these standards. If you're going to reference a standard, they have to be available to the public in some form without a cost. So, but I don't know how the linking will work.
We'll let Kobe and them figure that
I'll
out.
figure it out.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, so we will move that forward. All right, we're actually making some progress. So we will go to 3B, Chapter 16, Parks and Regulations.
So 3B and 3C is where we're now going to not make any progress because regrettably, for whatever reason, my calendar shows this meeting was canceled. So I apologize to everyone here. I have made edits to those. Had I assumed this meeting was working, I actually would have spent some of my time on Sunday putting this in final form and printing copies for all of you to review. So I apologize for not having those. It is substantially complete, both this and Peddlers, Solicitors, and Canvas. Chief and I did talk, and he's not here, so I guess I probably need to call and harass him. He and I spoke after our last meeting about the Peddlers, Solicitors, and Canvassers portion. He did have some suggested language he wanted for me that he'd seen in another ordinance. I do not believe he ever actually got me both of those. He told me what he wanted, but he never sent me the example. But the Parks and Regulation is just cleaning up what we talked about before, moving this into a city's facilities discussion, city properties, city facilities, and breaking it down. I will say one thing I do have in Chapter 16 as I'm looking at kind of what I have in front of me here, which y'all unfortunately are not able to look at. And I don't think you would really want all my notes and annotations on my own document. But in looking at it, it occurred to me that I ran a search of our code. And you're welcome to do this in MuniCode as well, along with me, and look up references to City Hall. And I believe what you will find is that the raw search shows 10 references and 4 ordinances. I think you can pair out some of those, but ultimately, there are several references to the phrase City Hall in our code, and yet City Hall is not listed, defined, or otherwise established. So as I was looking at this as a city's facility thing, something I don't want to surprise you with, I want to make sure y'all are comfortable about, is I think it is beneficial to actually have a section of our code that references City Hall. Designates the location of City Hall. I think we can ultimately, what we've done before, by the way, is we've allowed the council to designate an alternative location for City Hall. For instance, we've designated the community center as City Hall. But I think the way we've done that as a matter of convenience because the code is silent. Now, I will tell you, I am of the opinion that when constructing legal documents, and specifically ordinances or laws, it's better to spell out what something is and give the council the ability to deviate from that than to not spell out what something is and say, well, since it's not written, we can say whatever it is. One is wildly dissatisfying to the public, even though it is legal. The other is clear, and they may not like it, but they can at least acknowledge it. So, for instance, we have to say under our counting and canvassing of votes, it's supposed to be done at City Hall. But sometimes we've done it at that. So we just have the city designate. But I do think it is important to recognize there's a building that will be designated as City Hall. And that will be that will be the primary place for all city meetings, unless otherwise designated, directed by the city council. Same way when we're cleaning up the code, that the location of City Hall for a specified event or circumstance may be redesignated on a temporary basis from time to time as needed by city council. That way, if God forbid we found mold in here, or Kobe, I think you don't have the problem that Craig did, but I could tell you right after we got in there into the city manager's office, and I was in there in the gap between Mr. Thompson and actually it was in the gap between, well, was Mel here when we closed on the building, or was Mel
Thompson.
So when Thompson left, I was up there with Craig, and he had about 12 of the biggest wasps I've ever seen coming out of one of those lights. He's like, yeah, they found them out there on the side of the building. They're getting in through one of that. So Craig had Randall come up there, and they did some fumigation and got them out. But I'm sitting there thinking, all right, well, we have bees in the walls. But we should be able to designate what is our City Hall. So I think there's a benefit to that. I think as I look through the code, I also, that opened up a can of worms. And so I apologize for having that conversation, but we have Civic Center and and Chautauqua Auditorium are both listed. I think Chautauqua Auditorium, as I move it around, should be designated Chautauqua Hall of Brotherhood, which is the actual title we operate under. Auditorium does not actually address it. It occurred to me that when we're addressing parks and regulations under Chapter 16, we talk about Chipley Park, Lake Defuniak. We talked about the designations there. We've gone back and forth on that. So we'll have some conversation about that. But it specifically does address the amphitheater. And so as I'm looking at this, it's like, okay, we need a section that just talks about parks. And maybe Chipley Park itself is a call out, being the lake yard, so to speak. And we can address that. But we probably need something that indicates that there will be a asset inventory of city parks and how they are named, designated, and hours of operation that'll be maintained by resolution. And what I've done here is I've created something that will talk about all city parks under that general regulation that will be done, that will all have the same unless otherwise designated by signage of that park. And then we can break that down. But back to City Hall, we have this complex. We hope we're going to sell the old complex, but we probably do need to designate the city main infrastructure facilities. Now, do we need a reference to the city wastewater treatment plant? Probably not. But right now, it's public property. So if I, not in my official capacity, wanted to go out to our wastewater treatment plant, is there anything that stops me? Post a trespass warning up there. What's public land? What was the authority to post a trespass warning? Council vote to do it? Did the manager vote to do it? Where did it come from? These are things that are just good governance that we need to do. And it occurred to me, it's like, well, how City Hall's a public building. What's our authority to trespass somebody out of here if they show up and cause a scene? Well, we have a city marshal, and that's how we do it, frankly. But that may not legally uphold that case. So I think that's one thing I want to talk about is that the city will have other facilities. So City Hall is one. Two, I believe there needs to be a reference, and probably a long overdue reference, to the Defuniak Municipal Airport. I think our airport needs to be referenced in code. It is something different than the wastewater treatment facility, but we talk about airport regulations. We have an airport regulation meeting, right, Kobe?
Mhm.
That's a pretty robust document, if I recall. So, what is that document? Well, effectively, it's policy. It's not a law. So, adding some things in this, and I'm not talking about embedding all this into the code, but it's making those references. And so what I have done is I've attempted to add in City Hall and City Airport as two primary designatees, but then a section dealing with city publicly owned facilities and infrastructure shall be maintained in an asset inventory by the city, which shall be updated as needed, and that the city and that the city shall adopt resolutions or shall be entitled to adopt resolutions, policies, and other requirements regarding the use, accessibility, restrictions thereon. Because do we want people at our wastewater treatment plant? No. Do we want people say, well, can I come into City Hall after hours? No. Well, it's public. Why can't I be there? And people have had that elsewhere.
Yeah.
So I think it is important that we have those. So when I bring 16 back, what you will see is that I have made 16 more about, because we're eliminating 6.5, a city facilities, and we're going to have parks. We're going to break all these down. City buildings, City Hall would fall under the amphitheater, those type of things. Not figured out exactly. I will admit this, I would have sat down and thought about before I wrote it out, but do we have city buildings and city facilities separated to the extent that, say, the amphitheater and the airport might be something different? Or do we figure that out? If that's just a heading type of issue, I can figure that out and present it in a way, and you can tell me whether you like it or not. So that is where we're going to 16. You'll see that at your first meeting in January, which I do see is not canceled on my calendar, Raphael. So we will be good on that one. I'm still not sure what happened here, but I do see that we are set, ready to go on January the 7th. So I will be glad to have that ready for us at this time. And I will certainly apologize for not having everything ready for y'all to review tonight.
No worries, sir, because I'm looking at my computer right now, and I don't know where this one came from, but it has Robin listed here, and it says optional, and then I don't know, it says.
Well, Robin ain't ever who needs to be here because she ain't gonna show up at 5.
And
I
then it
can
says
promise.
canceled, and I'm getting maybe that's where it happened. I don't know, but.
I'm an invitee, but it's okay. I mean, but again, my apologies. I know. I said, well, I just told the mayor. The mayor said, well, I was gonna stick around to have all the fun with you. I said, well, I was trying not to have all the fun with you. They told me it was canceled, but I'm showing up, so we'll tag out. But so those are those two. I'll also have peddlers back. I'll verify with the chief if he did have some language or if he was just comfortable with what he and I spoke about being added in. We will be cleaning up those couple of issues we talked about last time. And so we stand with those ready to move forward. And those will be informed that barring certain cleanup, I think the peddlers will be ready to push to the council for adoption at your January meeting. I could imagine there might be some discussion under 16, but we should be ready to push that out. We could push that one out in January, but we should be pretty ready to go.
Okay, good deal.
So that's as much as I can give y'all tonight without trying to read something that y'all don't want me to read, 19-page document verbally.
Any other comments or discussion on those two items, B and C, 16 and 17?
Well, I'm just fascinated by the entire conversation of who can trespass someone in City Hall, and can anyone ask them to leave, or can only Kobe or an officer of the city ask someone to leave? It's kind of
Well, an officer, and an officer of the city does not mean a city police officer in
Right.
that sense.
I mean, meaning an executive officer of the city. To
Well, an
trespass.
individual council person can.
We have no power, so I can't imagine that we could.
Yeah, I think it comes down to the mayor and Kobe.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Wonderful.
kind of fascinating. So they'd have to call to remove a trespasser. To get permission from one of them.
It's crossed up on public property. That's what gets me on it. And I know that the police could. So,
No, it's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, and so this is the can of worms when I open up when I'm sitting here trying to do some of these later in the evenings, and I start wandering across the code and thinking, if I do that, that's going to lead to this, and that's going to lead to this, and it's the law of unintended consequences that's exponential in nature, not just a multiplicative solution. But there is that.
Well, it leads to the direct comfort and safety of employees in the building and in our facilities.
And then the question is, I will jokingly reference a former mayor, not of this city, but one of my other municipal clients, jokingly reminded a council member, and I say jokingly because he didn't do it. I'm not sure he was actually joking, but told a council member that when they were having a dispute about something, the council made a comment. It was in the wake of DeFuniak rearranging offices up here, that if said mayor wasn't careful, they'd relocate his office. The mayor said, well, you got to remember one thing. They got a city manager up there, and y'all have a mayor. And they said, yeah. He said, as a strong mayor, I run this city. If I were to trespass you, you won't ever set foot on city property without taking a ride to the county jail. So good luck coming to the council to make a motion or vote. The council member later was asked, he said, could he actually do it? My father's advice is, I don't think I would try to find out. Because yes, and if I didn't say it was Mayor Morrison in Freeport, he would be disappointed I didn't give him credit for that. But he told the council member that, and sure enough, I think he'd have tried to find out. Now, I think the sheriff's office probably would have been judicious enough not to grant him that trespass, but it does beg the question. Could Kobe trespass the bear if they got into it? Could the bear trespass? Look at City Sugar, please don't say that. But my point is, it's very easy to say these people will have the authority to oversee or regulate these buildings and that's just a very simple thing, because if Chief Hurley ever has to look for it and take it to the state attorney, they're not gonna have an answer.
Yeah.
Now, do we want to get into right away? No. We don't want to talk about that's different, but city property, it's always important to remember, city property is something we own, so we have to manage, but what's our management policy?
Yeah.
We don't have one. So I'll try to help y'all with that. So Chris, chapter 11. Come on up, I'll drag him up.
Come on
That's not
down.
me.
Remember, a lot of chapter 14 you had removed and we moved it to chapter 11, so.
Okay.
Chapter 11 was basically redone completely, as in new articles were added to it due to the fact that when chapter 14 was moved over to this section, it was shoved, it was like patchworked into different sections. So I attempted to remove sections and to move them to their own articles. So it was more of a standard reading. So the first sections are what was actually in chapter 11. Now they may be out of the sequence of what they originally were. So nothing really has changed that much. As you can see, like on page, starting on page 1, page 2, that section was moved from 14 to chapter 11. Then on page 4, that was another section of chapter 14 moved into chapter 11. So a lot of that stays the same. The powers of the magistrate basically stayed the same, except for on page 14, we added creation of code enforcement liens, reduction and release of liens, and possibly non-ad valorem assessments, which we already had a section in there, but it was not given to a section. We figured that the magistrate would be the better person to handle this than leaving it on the city manager's shoulders. And then on page 14 also, that's where we added Article 3, where we actually discuss code enforcement liens themselves, the process, jurisdiction over liens. All these were actually pulled from another city or county from the state of Florida. So these were established somewhere else. Now on page 17, we don't have an application fee. Is that something that the council or this committee would want?
Which fees?
On page 17, section 3.
Let's go back to 14. Let's
Okay.
start there. I think we need to establish, have a conversation on 7 and 8 first.
7 and 8 of,
On page 14, under section
Page
1128,
14 of the
powers.
document.
Page 14 of the document, under sections 1128, powers of special magistrate. And the reason I say it is because number 8 is what has to deal, number 7 is what has to deal with an application fee.
yes.
So number 6 is creation of a code enforcement lien, which we already do, because she does that when she issues liens.
Yes.
Number 7 is what we're talking about with the process of right now, as we've done with people who come in here. They petition to me. They would come in here, they have a conversation, we talk about it, and then we use discretion on lowering the fine to whatever level, this or that. Number 7, and the section below is to create a formal process where the magistrate oversees the reduction of those fines based off of an application and a set of standards. If they meet certain requirements, their liens come to a certain level. And that's what you see at the very first of all this documents is that application. So that's what that one is related to. That's why it's talking about a fee. And number 8 is a non-ad valorem assessments that tie into the abatements that we can get to afterwards. But
Here's a hard copy
Yeah.
of the suggestion for that, because there actually is a matrix on the back, which, if you get a violation into compliance at a certain time, we can reduce the fee or the fine down to amount to help kind of encourage you to, once you've been the magistrate, is to help encourage you to basically get on the project and get it in compliance. Now, we can change those percentages to what the council wants, where it's less lenient or more lenient, is wherever y'all want. This is based off of Broward County. I just basically changed our names and information in there.
This is coming about because 2 managers ago, that one was a little too, I would say, too much power, and it was just reducing them down to nothing. And then 1 manager ago, it was to what the intent of the ordinance is.
Right.
You can't make, city's got to make money on it. We'll take what you put in to clean up, subtract that from the lien, and you pay it. So we've had varying different enforcements of it. So is that something we want to standardize?
Sir.
Question. I want to be cautious with the phrasing on that. I know it's not what you intended. The city doesn't have to make money. I don't want this ever to be discussed in terms of the city making money.
Yeah.
We are seeking compliance to remedy a harm is all
Yeah.
we're trying to do. So we're never trying to make money. So I just want to make sure I just don't want that included in our vocabulary at all.
Well, I actually,
Well, I think that was
agree.
some of the logic that previously
Yeah.
drove that discussion, was trying to make the financial gain of the money that was outstanding, how to capture that. And I agree with your position, but just so you're saying, I think that was the language that was being bandied about.
And I think if we're depending on this for income, we got a problem.
Right.
Yeah, agreed. I think that there's a certain, a section of it says that something about the city,
Expenses.
Well,
yeah, but the person that
direct
making a
cost.
violation can't make something. I can't
Should not,
remember.
it's basically, the intent of the section, without me
Yeah.
reading it verbatim to you, basically created a situation that, so you're selling the property and you're asking for a reduction of the lien. You couldn't create a situation where the person got a windfall above the city. That was the goal. The person was
Right.
not to profit above the
Right.
city.
Correct. No. Yeah.
So the idea was their profit, not our profit, but then that got skewed in that discussion.
So how does that one translate? Could you walk me through that one in terms of how that translates, that example?
So the way that, once we did it and started doing it, prior manager would take and say, okay, you got an $80,000 lien. It took you 40,000 to bring it up to code and to settle the fines. We'll reduce it by we'll reduce it by the amount of money it took you to bring it into compliance, and then now you owe the remaining balance.
Is that percentage wise or is that just
Well,
amount?
they did a couple of things. The other one they did, that was not percentage wise, was a situation where somebody was selling a home and they were going to sell a property. That they said they had spent money cleaning it up. They showed us they'd spent $60,000, I think it was. The code liens were well above that. I think they were at the 80 or 90 mark. But it may have been 40, you may be right there. But ultimately they were going to make couple $100,000. So what they were looking for is the forgiveness of the balance. And the issue and the reason that was written into place was if you've spent $50,000 to fix it up, maybe that remedied the code liens, maybe it didn't. But why let somebody fix it up enough to go sell it to somebody else? We have a lien. If you sell your house and you have a mortgage on it, the bank's going to get paid first, I can promise you. Right. So if we have a lien, why aren't we getting paid when the property sells? And the answer was, well, we fixed it up. We did a lot to bring it in compliance. Well, you didn't do anything to bring it into compliance until somebody's going to pay you a pile of money. You're going to make $200,000. The city's getting zero except for the compliance, but we're letting a lien go. Well, the point is, it was a harm to our community during that window. We should get the other amount of money. The goal was situation to effectively say, look, if you're selling this property and you're not making anything on it, we aren't going to make anything either. So it's a straight wash. You know what I mean? So the idea was to avoid some of these issues. We just have one that got foreclosed on, for instance. We have one where we have liens. The bank foreclosed it. They have priority lien. Our lien will go away. We went to court. The big thing we always do when we do it is we go to court, and they almost always notice us wrong. So we show up and say, look, do you want us to quash the subpoena and set the city out of this altogether? Have to restart the whole process, or do you want your foreclosure today with the stipulation that if there's a surplusage, we get it the sale. They don't have to give that to us. They almost always agree. They did in this one. Now, is there gonna be a surplus? Probably not, but there might be. We don't know. But if the bank just takes it back, Chris goes to the magistrate, sends notice to the bank, hey, you're the new owner, our old lien's is gone, but the code violation's not resolved. Here's your notice, clean it up by now, or we start back. And then what we'd ask the magistrate to do is impose maximum fines or designated a repeat violation on that property and do whatever we can to expedite the ramp up of the code the second time. They won their right under a foreclosure, but we can exercise ours. We no longer have super priority liens in code. We used to in cities up to about 2011, but that went away. So the idea was to basically allow people to get out from under debt-laden scenarios without making a windfall. But if they're going to make a windfall, the city should get its cut of what our fine is, just like anybody else.
That's great.
No, he answered because the percentage wise that, I'm just trying to figure out if the percentage wise on it, the lien, how we come out with it. That's my question with it.
It was never calculated. It kind of varied 1 to 1. So, but that's what that's about. Turning back to kind of where we are before we move on to I'm going to comment on the non-ad valorem assessment so we can talk about this for a second. There's a pro and a con to it. The pros, obviously, it removes the city manager, removes some of the political discussion. Most of the time I've seen this done, and I've tried to research a little bit since our last conversation about it, it does appear that there is a limitation on what that assessment can be. So it's not just unchained or unbridled. So if we are going to go that route, we need to set a monetary limit. And maybe it's percentage based, maybe it's a fixed dollar amount. But those non-ad valorem assessments are something to talk about. But what we've been talking about previously in terms of nuisance abatement is a non-ad valorem based assessment that would be levied citywide that would address certain blighted properties and possibly have exemptions for non-blighted properties. There are two different ways to go about it. So this is the companion methodology that a lot of places use rather than doing the full methodology we described in one of our last meetings. But so that's why I just said we need to come back to that. That's probably a much more robust conversation.
Can I throw one
Of course.
thing in there? I'm interpreting this thing, but why can't we, I guess it could be abuse of it. With some properties being sentimental and passed down through generation and it got out of whack with this generation we got now, the Gen Z. Is there any way we can put a hardship in there and look at the generation gap with it and see that if not, so that gives them some type of leeway with it? Is that possible?
There's probably a few options there. Cubby, you go ahead and jump in before I.
So in terms of the non-ad valorem assessment, it would go through the same process as a code lien. He would do all his due diligence, his notices, go through that part. Then it would come to the magistrate. They would be given so many days. If not, then the magistrate would have the ability to say, okay, the city's going to abate this property in 60 days. And after that point, then it goes to another long process, whatever goes to tax roll. As in any other tax deed, right? You're by tax deeds first, and then you get to a certificate at the end of 3 years. That person would have 3 years. They wouldn't just automatically lose property. So, and that's what, like he just mentioned, we talked about, Chris and I did. No one's going to buy a tax deed if it's $100,000. No one's going to buy that unless they got the money for that investment. So I think Bay County, they cap it like Clay had mentioned. They say we only abate up to this dollar amount, and that's what we assess. Because if no one buys it, then we're in a worse position than we were. So could there be? Yes, but to me, it's already kind of built in. There's already going to be a minimum 3-year timeline built in. That person could always retain the property.
But in the process, they still got to bring it back up or do something with it. What you're
That's right.
saying there.
Yes.
Even if they obtain the tax deed back.
Correct.
I got you.
And really, the properties that'll be abated would be properties that I would have to call in the building department, Mr. Bearden. And it's gonna be properties that he's listed as unsafe to live in. And so it's not gonna be something that is just a minor violation. It's be the ones that basically he says that either you're going to fix up or you have to demolish because it's that unsafe.
100% understood.
So, yeah, it could be, you would,
And let me just say to everybody on this forum here, why I ask that question? Because my people, and I can talk about them, we have the hardest, and I know you know what I'm talking about. We have the hardest and the worst understanding. Trying to keep all the crabs from grabbing and nobody going to do anything. That's one of the biggest problems I've been wrestling with. I have got a few done. Chris knows I got a few done, but it's just like, man, it's worse than pulling your wisdom tooth. And I'm so disappointed in them not coming to some type of decision and conclusion. This one don't want to put money in it. That one don't want to put money in it. But that's why I asked the question. And I try to go tell them, say, hey, that man had a hell of a job. Excuse me for saying that away. Yeah, I wouldn't want it. You couldn't give it to me. You couldn't give it to me. Meaning that I know one individual, I ain't calling no names here, he'd have been to several times. And we have tried to help him. But he's so entrenched. If he was in the war, I guess he'd be an Arthur Murphy. And he just won't do nothing, man. Won't even let nobody do nothing. And I understand it, but just to come to that, and his kids won't do them because they don't have anything. But I'm just so much concerned about it because it's been in the family so many generations. And I try to tell them that. I sit down and I talk to them for hours. And man, my hair is just turning worse green than what it is. And it bothers me, really, because I know the family. So that's why I asked the question I asked. But those away from here want to keep their fingers in the pot and never put nothing to it. And this man keep going around. Fix it. Clean it up. Got one right on ball right now. I could clean it up. He's still there, no water. Shouldn't be there. Just the lights. Lights really shouldn't be on. And it's a nuisance. We got the Black History Parade coming up. I try to address that all the time. It's red on the route. And I try to have everything cleaned up from the end of Arthur Construction, which is the last business on the end, all the way down to Thomas Street. All those that isn't paying the tax and all those that is, and those some in between. And it's important to have decent and in order all the way down the street. And he had worked with me very diligently. And I was strong to tell you I wouldn't have his job. Because some of them just, and just like I say, I did what I can do as a citizen. I did what I do as a friend, but it's rough. It's rough. But those out of town is the worst ones. They want to have their hands in the bucket. But they don't want to put nothing in to clean it up and to pay the tax and bring it up to snuff. You got one right down the end of Parks Creek in Dorsey. I tried to buy it. I ain't rich. I think I got enough pennies in the bucket to get it. But they ain't doing nothing to it. And it grieves my heart to see the other people that I knew when I was a little child coming up. See, I'm just trying to hold on to something to pass it down. And most of the time, it's not the ones that here. In some cases, in that one there next beside me, it is. But that one down there, it's the ones away from here. Well, you ain't gonna sign it because I don't want to sign. You can't sell it because I don't want to sign. That's all I'm gonna get. Hey, you can't get a mountain out of molehill. You can't get it. So all I can say to the board, you do what you got to do. Because some of them I'm just sick of. I'm sorry to say it that way. And I go to them, I try to talk to them, I sit down, I say, let's have dinner together. Let's just talk face to face. It's difficult. I had one on the contract here a few weeks ago. She backed out and she lived in Crestview. I've been cutting her yard for 20 years. You know how much I got out of it? $0. And I had the house. She says, you want to sell it? I done paid the lawyer $600. She said, well, I'll give you half for it back. I said, what about the other half? So there are some motion, but do what you got to do. That's all I can say. Because some of them just not going to budge. It's not. And I'm sad to say that. It really grieves my heart to sit here and say that, but it is. And I tell you, that one next to me, written on the door, it was discussion the other day, Brother Scrum. The daughter said, well, I can't get dad to do nothing. I said, well, hell, move out. You got 6 kids, 6 different daddies, move out. I just told like, well, I ain't care about to get mad at me. You waiting on daddy. Daddy's not going to do anything. Daddy's sitting in his ways. He concrete. He's not going to do nothing. That man, I'll tell you that. But it just go on this way. Left turn, going this way. He ain't gonna do nothing. So yeah, I understand what you're saying. It bothers me mentally, but it's nothing I can do. I'll try to lend a helping hand, try to direct them. So I'm just not gonna move. And it's sad. It's really sad. It's sad to see the community that you have went to school and been educated in, and seen the elder people took a stand and keep clean around the house. You can eat off the ground. And this generation, man, you can forget it. I wouldn't go to war to. I've been in 2 of them. I wouldn't go to war to. No. But anyway, thank you. Thank you.
The only reason I like Section 8, and here's the reason why. If we actually do abate the property and the city's paying $10,000 to knock down a house and have it all demoed to bring the property into compliance, that's $10,000 we're eating. Citrus County does this all the time. They get 98% of their money back. That'll be money I can get back to the city so I can do more again to help bring properties into compliance. And that's the only reason that you actually already have an ordinance on this. It's been that the city has. I've just made it to a different whole section and actually gave it to the magistrate to be able to allow us to do that, to take it off the council's responsibilities and the city manager's responsibilities, so that it'll fall under the magistrate because she's doing the order, she's doing the liens. And there would be certain criteria. It wouldn't be abatements on everything that we do on those. We would do certain liens as we're normally doing for the code violations, but when we actually do a true abatement of a structure, then we would ask for a non-ad valorem assessment.
Let me say this. Y'all got to hear this. I'm gonna tell you something he did. You got to hear this one. My wife, family members agreed when my mother-in-law died to sell the house. Well, I want it because it's right next to our property. I want it bad because I know how it is when you get a hog pen up under you. Or you get a cow pen next to it, which we allow that in the city.
Not
All
anymore.
right?
Not anymore.
But
Back then,
things happen. So, and then not only that, you got baby kids in the city, let's just say it that way. So they wouldn't do it. So I kept trying to work with them. So I just let the yard go. I said, heck with it. I ain't getting nothing out of it. So I try to talk to them and say, sell it. You know when they decide they need to sell it? I didn't tell him. I let him do his job. He sent a letter to every one of them. Every one of them. Well, why he ain't clean up the yard? Well, who paid me? That's what I want to ask you a question. Who paid me? I've been doing it for 12 years. So if you sold the property, the lawyer told me I don't get anything. I don't get anything. If I fix the property, I don't get anything. I researched it. So when he sent a letter to California, when he sent a letter to Texas, when he sent a letter to Atlanta, Georgia, when he sent a letter to Detroit, Michigan, well, we need to do something. Oh, we've been saying this all the time. So thank you. He got their attention. Now the color folks going to do something. I'm sorry to say it that way. Because they didn't want to do anything. But this is another example. He kept their hands in the pot, but never put anything in the pot. That's a hard job right there. Do you hear what I say? That's a hard job. You get cussed out, you're getting stomped on, you're getting calls on. I know this because some of my relatives did it. Some of them did it. But couldn't get attention. No matter what I say, no matter what the wife say, couldn't get the attention. And they quit paying the taxes. Now that's one thing I did do. I didn't pay the tax because my mother-in-law wouldn't like me not to do that. But when he sent it out to all them jokers, oh Lord, they called him. They called him in. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In the interest of time, do we want to carry this forward? And I fully expect us to do this, especially with some of these larger changes, so that there's ample opportunity for the public to make comments on it, even though I don't see anybody. Miss Cindy, are you here as an employee or
I'm
public?
not gonna make any comment.
Okay. For the record, she said she wasn't going to make any comments. So I say we agree to bring this forward at the next meeting, and that'll give us all some time to digest it and look at it. I've looked through it. Chris, I think it looks good. I think it's what we asked for. So let's just put it down as an agenda item for next time. It'll be under code review. Number 3, code review. And then obviously, as Clay said, we'll have 16 and 17 that we'll review as well, and then move on out because we voted to basically move 3A already up to the council. So chapter 11 can effectively take the place of chapter 14 on our agenda for January. And then February, we can hopefully move on to like chapter 15, chapter 12, maybe even from there. So does that sound good to everybody, that we'll agree to kind of revisit this and again solicit input from public in the meantime while we're around family and friends for the holidays? Does that sound good?
I have to move away from them. We want to eat me up.
Yes. Can I throw something out there, at least for thought and discussion?
Sure.
And it may be too complicated, it may muddy it up, but because we are dealing with a lot of property owners that lack funds, which is part of the reason that things fall into disrepair, I would like to at least have a conversation about, with the reduction of enforcement liens, if there is a partnership with nonprofits or other entities, church groups, anything like that, to assist folks because they don't have the cash to do it, a discussion of how those liens can be reduced as part of that. Because I think there should be a conversation in those cases, because we're at that point, we're including other parts of the community. They're coming forward, they're stepping up, they're contributing time, labor, materials, but not necessarily cash. And again, I don't want to see a situation where we actually get the improvement that we're seeking without relief financially, which cannot be overcome by some individuals based on their income levels. So again, it's not to do a giveaway. It's not to do a carte blanche forgiveness. This is something when other entities are stepping up to contribute in-kind resources rather than cash. I'd like to see the possibility of some additional reduction, because otherwise we're not going to see the improvement, because there will be no incentive for anyone to step in unless there's something like that.
Yes.
And again, it's for conversation.
Well, if you look at the matrix that I want you to look at and suggest, is that, so if you fix the violation within 1 year, the fine is reduced by 50%. The fines vary between $25 a day to $100 a day. So it would go ahead and be reduced automatically. Let's say it took you 1 year, it was $100 a day. So it's about $3,000 roughly. So it automatically would be reduced to $1,500. Then, you also, they can ask for a request through the magistrate to even have it more reduced, but it falls under the magistrate of what we do.
36.
But
Or we
yeah,
can,
but that's 36,000.
36,000.
okay.
You're good.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking about people that have
Or we can
Zero
rechange those numbers to it's reduced by 80%.
And again, this isn't an across the board. This isn't if it's sold for profit. What I'm talking about is these are properties we're talking about that we as a policy do not foreclose on, because it is homeowners that are in their home. And we have said we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
So again, how are we ever going to get compliance? Even if they pass away, then we're locked into, a probate process in an extended period where again, we still have the blight. If there's a path, I'm just saying, we want compliance. If there's a path and an outside entity is willing to step up and help fix the problem, what can we do? I mean, if we get it down to 3,000, then, okay, then the church, maybe a church can help with that if they're willing to.
Right.
Also, as part of that conversation, Clay, Chris, whoever could tell me, if it is remediated, if a problem is corrected, but they are not able to pay the fine, how does that process play out? Again, the lien stays on the property, but is there a penalty on the lien? Is the lien automatically increasing? Is it accruing
No.
interest? Is
We
there
can-
anything else beyond?
We can. I have not. It's locked. Once the properties, we have a couple that's, they're in compliance, but they have liens on them. The lien is locked. City can actually charge interest. I just never did because the odds of them
You
paying
can't bleed a stone.
what they have, so there's no, why hit them even harder while it's down by charging 8% interest or whatever, because it's actually registered by the state for us quarterly.
Because some of what I'm seeing, having these same conversations, there's no incentive for a church to come step in because the lien is still there. They'll never pay it off.
I understand 100 what you're saying, Councilman. I still think we got an big open discussion with this because I still think, council, I need you. Is that if that person passed away, I think that we need to put a safety net for the city there somewhere or another. They can't sell that property without the city acquiring back their money. Because if we fix that, or if we get the groups to do that, we need some type of safety net to catch that so you can recoup the money back to the city. Because you got this generation, and I do say this generation, all they want is $1. But the city's going without. So what I would like to see as well as some type of safety net, if these nonprofit organizations want to help them and they loved one pass away, the first thing they ain't gonna do nothing. They want to sell it. So I need the city to recoup their money before that happens. Or why it's in the process.
Well,
I agree with it. I agree with them helping them.
once the property has a lien on it, that property is locked. And unfortunately, for some, Councilman Bierma, you have a violation and I put a lien on his property. He has 5 other properties in his name. It locks up all 5 properties. If he sells
We
one,
just did
he's
that.
got to pay that lien back to the city first before he can sell any of those properties.
And so to comment to both of them, we've started, we've done it a couple times now. Magistrate, we go through orders. She will order that individual to communicate with CRA. How can CRA assist in addressing the blight? Now, the CRA, maybe now, I think with the roof or something, they don't, all their grants are some sort of fund matching. In the future, does the CRA create grant programs that have no matching funds and require no prepayment if you're a citizen of the city? Who knows? But maybe that's a mechanism to help correct some of that. The magistrate orders it, it goes to CRA then takes care of that financially for the property as long as they're a citizen. So I think there's ways of doing it, like you're saying. How do we incentivize that?
Because at the end of the day, all we want is to clean up blight.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's all we want.
Yeah.
And we don't want to be foreclosing on properties. We don't want to own properties. We don't want to try to sell properties to recoup costs.
Right.
We want stuff fixed and safe. And again, I just want to make sure that when we create a policy, one, we have to get enforcement. It has to be fair. I just want there to be a path. I just want to make sure there's a path that works. And I don't have an answer. I'm just saying, I just want us to think about this as we're doing this to create a path that makes sense. And I think we can do it. It's not gonna be fun. It's not gonna be easy, but I think we can do it.
Well, and even if we go to the magistrate and, and assess fines, I want them to have a path that once they start getting fines, it looks bleak for them. And I understand that. So I like the idea of reduction of fines a possibility because it gives them that window of, okay, I can get the property fixed and I can get the fines lowered where it's something that the city recoups its costs for what time and, the cost of the magistrate and everything that we do. And it still comes in compliance for us. And they're not looking at a huge fine.
will mention one thing. So with the CRA director, we talked about having neighborhood captains, so to speak, for lack of a better term, or neighborhood champions, people who are, we live within any neighborhood, within any given neighborhood, there is someone that is active or involved, and having them be a point of contact and having them be a point of outreach to assist so that we don't let the fines accrue, so that within that first window, we can agree to make the corrections, work with a church that makes sense, work with a community organization that makes sense, identify a group that can provide support and get it done before it becomes a problem.
Yes.
So there is an active component that's being worked on. Right now, we do have a lot of stuff because this has been going on for, a few years now. We've got a group of properties, of homes, of commercial properties that have gotten far enough behind that it's creating an impossible uphill battle, at least the perception of an impossible uphill battle, which will not generate compliance. I want to be clear. It's actually creating a barrier to compliance. So I want to see, one, how do we deal with those and how do we prevent that from happening again? And maybe one will negate the need for the other. If we can fix going forward so that they don't creep in, maybe we can just clean up that backlog with another short-term policy. Maybe that policy can go away after a while and it's no longer needed.
Sounds good. Want to move on to number 5? You good?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
I think
All
we're
right.
still.
Committee priority list, are there any changes to the priority list at this time? Does anybody want to make any changes or request anything?
I think we've got a full plate right now.
Yeah.
The one thing I do want to look at sooner rather than later, we keep hearing that we're going to be doing a larger overview or revision to some of the zoning and building ordinances. It's the parking requirement. I think we need to address some of the parking concerns sooner rather than later, even though we're going to have some things coming up. But I'd wait until we had Mr. Wallace around to talk to about that.
So we will, parking, I know the CRA is working with the company that's doing the study and then hopefully have that conversation in February, I believe. And then in terms of the LDC, we will have the RFP on the council meeting on Monday and hopefully issue that the very 1st of January and have bids back by the 1st of March at the latest for consideration.
Anything else on priority list?
I think we got our plate full.
That's right. I
let's get
agree.
this
I think we got a plate full of this one here. I'm about to really get down with it.
Yeah, this is going to be a big one.
Yeah. All right. So 6, we've kind of already covered. I mentioned this a few minutes ago. So we've already voted to move chapter 14 forward to the council, which would mean we're going to have 16, 17, and 11 chapters, 16, chapter 17, chapter 11 on our January meeting. And then if we are expeditious and move 16 and 17 in January, that would then free up space in February for some of these other topics. I really would like to tackle chapter 12 in particular next. Maybe start that in February if all holds true.
Okay.
Does that sound good to everybody?
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. All right. I don't see any citizens in the audience, so we don't have any citizens' comments. Any final comments or thoughts before we close?
I'm going to do a research again on the Blythe area of where I'm committed to in the district and see if I can't push a little bit forward because some people come in during the Christmas holidays. So I'm going to see if I can get us a little bit more help from outside with the citizen that own property in the area. And I have contacted one already, so he hadn't responded, but I'm pretty sure that he will. And hopefully we can get something done. That's what I'm praying for.
Sounds good. Chris, thank you for being here tonight. Sir, thank you for all you do. Appreciate y'all.
You're welcome.
All right, this meeting is adjourned.